Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is October 9th, 2014. In just a moment, we'll be covering your public, aviation, and marine forecasts. When we're not on air, you can always check us out. All of our information is available on www.arh.noaa.gov, or you can also call our weather information line at 1-800-472-0391. And you can always find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter if you navigate to our social web pages via our web page. All right, now looking at the important weather of the day, we have this weather system that is finally starting to kick to the east. At the center of the system that we're going to be watching spin here in just a moment is just south of Unalaska, with an elongated front that stretches across just south of the western Aleutians. Putting this into motion, you can see the moisture spinning around this low pressure system. Low clouds are actually trapped along the southern Bering here, just not showing up on the satellite as the temperatures are very cool with the clouds versus the sea surface temperature, so that doesn't always get picked up. So there's some low clouds along the southern Bering, and looking at the areas closer to home, we have this huge swath of moisture that stretches all the way into the southeast at this point. This is due to a front that had moved up yesterday and combining with this low pressure system that is a stacked surface low and upper low system just south here of Unalaska, putting that into motion. You can watch that spin and pushing this weather front all the way up along the south central areas. So bring rain along here, and along the northern half of the state, some low clouds coming as a low pressure system just spinning off to the north here is bringing some colder air temperatures down towards the Brooks Range. And with this low pressure system here to the south of the Alaska Peninsula, cold air is making it all the way down towards the southern Bering. So just putting that into motion one more time, you can see this low pressure here bringing the colder temperatures in, and just a small break in the clouds along the southwest today. All right, here's a surface feature, 958 millibar low, stretching this front all the way into the southeast. Rain along the eastern areas of the Gulf and all along the northern coastal areas back towards Kodiak Island, with some showers making it ahead and deep level moisture moving on up through the coastal areas. So very cold temperatures still across the mainland is bringing the moisture. When the moisture is coming up, it's falling as snow as it makes it further inland. Along the northern coastal areas, a weak disturbance in the flow aloft is continuing some light snow showers along the north coast, visibilities between 2 and 4 miles per 2 to 4 miles in visibility. So along the northwest coast, some light shower activity, otherwise dry across the west coast areas with the cold air mass along the Bering. The low clouds are just trapped there at the surface, making this really interesting mackerel type pattern. Now along the western Aleutians, we've got some stratocu here, and we have remnants of the front just kind of washing out. Along this boundary here, we have some gusty winds between 30 and 40 miles per hour, higher gusts up to 45 to 55 miles per hour, as well as along the frontal locations, gusty winds here, and gusty winds fell all the way through the southeast where this boundary is draped across. Now looking at your forecast as we head into tonight, expect this boundary to stay lodged just along the northern Gulf, and moisture will continue to push inland. So we'll see the light shower activity with some rain and snow as you head up towards the Alaska Range, with a possibility for freezing rain mainly along the Susitna Valley as it briefly goes from snow changing quickly over to rain. So along the southwestern areas, mainly snow here with a chance for rain along the Aleutian Range, a mix of rain and snow in between. Along the Alaska Peninsula, mainly rain for tonight and mainly snow across the eastern parts of the Bering, but can't rule out the chance for some light rain showers as a weak wave moves on the backside of this low pressure system. Gusty winds, as you can see this tight gradient across the backside of the low, will continue to gust through the night, and along the southeast they'll see winds continuing to gust along the frontal areas. Also, gusty winds will develop along the Alaska Range and just north as this low presses towards the north against the higher pressure that's slowly receding back towards the west. Expect light snow showers to continue across the central areas with snow along the coast and patchy fog conditions here. And then for your Friday forecast, this low pressure system will finally start to make its way up into the Gulf waters, bring the rain all along the coast for another day. And as we get through your Friday, warmer temperatures will make it further north, so a mix of rain and snow along the central areas back towards the Kuskokwim Delta, with mainly snow across the eastern part of the Bering. Gusty winds as this gradient remains tight and the flow becomes more of a northerly flow during the day. Along the northern coast, expect gusty winds here, and we'll see snow all the way across the northwest coast once again. The southeast will see the heaviest amount of rainfall with this low pressure system through your Friday, with totals between 2 and 4 inches, slightly higher, and with the higher elevations having snow, we might have some melting, causing some flooding along local streams in that area. Now heading into your Saturday forecast, another round of rain will be on its way as another weak waves moves into the coastal area, so expect Saturday to be rainy all along the northern Gulf and just inland back towards the central areas of the state, changing over to a snow as you head towards the north. A little bit of a break across the Seward Peninsula and the lower Yukon Valley, with snow remaining for another day across the north and northwest coast. Once again, gusty winds will taper off slightly on Saturday for the southeast as that low pressure lifts to the north, and then we'll see the winds begin to slacken as well across the Alaska Peninsula and the western Gulf areas. However, a strong northerly flow will continue across much of the Bering, except the western Bering, where we have another ridge moving into the area, and they'll be under a weaker flow condition there. Looking at your temperatures for today, it was warmest across the southeast with temperatures in the mid-50s. We saw 57 at Annette, and the highest was actually Petersburg, up to 59 during the afternoon hours, and mainly in the mid-40s across the Gulf of Alaska as this warm air mass pulls towards the north. And just inland, you see the very quick temperature drop into the lower 20s. And along the Brooks Range, we had temperatures only in the teens, with warmer temperatures along the northwest coast in the mid to upper 20s. Across the Seward Peninsula, warmed here into the lower 30s. And then along the southwestern areas, mainly in the upper 20s to lower 30s, with warmer temperatures noted along the coast. They had temperatures up in the mid to upper 30s, and very cold just near Dillingham, below freezing, bringing snow, and then a change over very quickly to the mid 40s all across the southern part of the Bering here, with slightly cooler temperatures in the Pribilofs, 39 at St. George this afternoon, and then St. Paul, 38. And the rest of the Aleutians is starting to cool off now, with temperatures only reaching into the mid-40s. And as we head into your nighttime temperatures, we'll not see much change across the Bering as that cooler air mass is coming down, so they're going to moderate. Slightly warmer temperatures here again across the Alaska Peninsula in the lower 40s, with the warmer temperatures across the coastal areas in the mid-30s, to even seeing 50 degrees possibly overnight as warmer air just lifts from the Gulf. And then a quick change over to the colder temperatures inland across central areas, only seeing into the teens tonight. Along the coastal areas, they should drop too into the lower teens, and on back towards the northwest coast, they'll be in the upper teens to lower 20s. And along the west coast to the south of the Kuskokwim Delta, another change from near freezing along the Mercuric, and then we'll see temperatures only into the mid-20s near Dillingham. Not much change change in temperature here. But tomorrow we'll see another day of warm temperatures, at least for the southeast and along the Gulf waters, getting into the mid-40s to mid-50s. Across the areas just north of there, temperatures will be climbing into the mid-30s to mid-40s, so significant warming there. Along the Arctic coast, we'll see temperatures climbing into the lower 20s, and then across the Seward Peninsula and south, temperatures will be right around freezing until you get to Bristol Bay, where you have that changeover into the upper 30s to lower 40s. Across the rest of the Aleutians, we'll see into the mid-40s. A notable change in the flying weather conditions as we have those low clouds socked in across all of the Bering. So MVFR widespread across the Bering and the Alaska Peninsula, and then widespread IFR conditions across the southeastern areas and the western areas of the Gulf of Alaska. And then MVFR conditions elsewhere across much of the state, except a little bit of clearing along the west coast, and IFR conditions also possible just to the southeast of the Brooks Range. Looking at your passes in more depth, we'll see MVFR and IFR at the north entrance of Anatuvik Pass. Adigan Pass will be IFR, and then Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will both be MVFR. Rainy Pass, IFR, and Windy Pass will be MVFR to IFR. And looking at Isabel, they'll be IFR all day, and Mentasta MVFR. Tanita Pass will be MVFR going down to IFR later, and Portage will start out at IFR and remain that way all day. And Chilkoot and White Pass will be IFR, possibly getting a little bit better during the late afternoon hours, possibly evening to MVFR. And then your freezing levels across the state, well, mainly hugging just off the west coast here and pushing slightly inland from the northern Gulf. The 2,000-foot level has climbed from 2,000 along the south central areas and back towards the Gulf waters, cooling as 2,000 is pretty much in the northern Gulf and 4,000 feet just to the south of the Alaska Peninsula. So cooler there, and up to 6,000 to 8,000 across the Gulf waters. Looking at your icing for tomorrow, mainly concerned about around this area around the low, with possible moderate conditions above 5,000 feet across the northern Gulf, and also some light icing along the northern half and the eastern areas of the state above 2,000 feet. Looking at your jet stream for tomorrow, more of a westerly flow aloft with this low beginning to lift. The strongest jet stream here is noted well to the south of the Aleutians at 145 knots. Looking at your 9,000-foot winds, here's the northerly flow across much of the Bering between 35 and 45 knots. And then you have a change of direction around the low pressure in the western areas of the Gulf, with the strongest winds just out ahead of the low pressure system. Lighter flow across much of the southeast and the eastern areas of the state, 25 to 30 knots, and a northerly flow across the north and northwestern areas between 20 and 30 knots. Looking at your 3,000 feet winds, there's a change of direction. Again, around this low pressure system, strongest winds mainly on the backside, and the south and eastern areas of this low between 35 and 40 knots, with a south to southeasterly flow across eastern areas of this state and all the way across the north coast. Even a stronger wind here at 35 knots along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Strong winds across the Bering Strait, the strongest at 50 knots there. Looking at your turbulence for tomorrow, you'll see this wide area of turbulence around this low pressure system, and mainly for speed shear across the Bering, and then a change of direction along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast will be the hazard, and across the Brooks Range mainly a speed shear, and also a speed shear across the northern Gulf areas, with possible moderate conditions along the northern and the the northern areas of the Gulf and the southeast locations. Now we'll be back in just a moment to talk about your marine forecast.
The Fall Sky Saga.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight. The ancient stargazers had a lot of imagination.
When they looked at the stars, they connected the dots and pictured people, animals, rivers, and even entire scenes.
And in the fall evening sky, if you have an ancient imagination, you can see a king and a queen,
A prince and a princess,
two monsters, and
a flying horse who's flying upside down, by the way.
that's right. It's gonna get crowded up there, but we can walk you through it.
Okay, we have our sky set up for 9 p.m. facing northeast. About halfway up in the sky, you'll find the 5 familiar stars that look like a letter W.
This is the beautiful but vain Queen Cassiopeia. Now stretch your imaginations a little and see if you can make out a queen of Ethiopia sitting on her throne.
Sorry, I guess I don't have that much imagination. But once you find her, she is the central character of our story and to the fall constellations.
Legend has it that Cassiopeia bragged about her beauty way too much. In fact, one day she said, now get this, she said, "I'm more beautiful than all the mermaids in the ocean."
Yikes. That got Poseidon, the god of the sea, worked up. He confronted Cassiopeia's husband, King Cepheus, whose 5 fainter stars are up and to the left of his wife. The stars look kind of like an upside-down house.
For insulting the gods, Cassiopeia had to give up her one and only daughter, the princess Andromeda, as a sacrifice. Basically, they had to chain Andromeda to a big rock in the ocean and let Poseidon's pet sea monster eat her.
You can find Andromeda to the right of Cassiopeia. Her stars look more like a skinny letter A.
A for Andromeda.
Exactly. Andromeda also houses the closest spiral galaxy to our Milky Way. It's called the Andromeda Galaxy because you can find it near her right hip star. Of course, if you live in a light-polluted area, you won't be able to see this galaxy. However, if you're out in the country, you just might see it looking like a little cloud, barely visible to the naked eye.
With binoculars, you can resolve a lot more of its cloudy nature. And with a telescope, you can see it as a long, fuzzy blur. Imagine, this is a galaxy with 200 billion stars that you can't see with the naked eye. Space is scary big.
Now, before the sea monster makes his appearance, we must introduce our hero, Perseus. As the story goes, Perseus that very morning slew the wicked Gorgon, Medusa.
She's the one with snakes for hair and turns you to stone with just one look.
With his eyes closed, Perseus chopped off her head, then put her head in a bag for safekeeping.
Later that afternoon, as he was flying through the air on his winged sandals, with the infamous bag at his side, Perseus happened to spy a young maiden in distress.
Our princess, Andromeda. Now, we're facing east at 10 p.m., and Perseus comes on the scene. You can find him as a squiggle of stars below Andromeda's feet.
The sea monster, a constellation named Cetus, is just rising in the east-southeast. Using my modern imagination, I think his stars look like a recliner chair.
That doesn't seem so scary.
Anyway, Perseus yells to Andromeda, "Close your eyes!" Then he closes his eyes, reaches into the bag and pulls out Medusa's severed head, shows it to the sea monster, who takes one look at it and poof, turns to stone.
Perseus saves the day. Wow, what a starry story. A king, a queen, a prince and princess, 2 monsters, and oops, we forgot the flying horse.
Oh yeah, Pegasus was supposedly born from this epic battle. As Perseus held out Medusa's head, this is kind of gross now, some of her blood fell into the water and turned magically into Pegasus the flying horse.
Oh, come on, that is too weird.
Agreed, but that's the kind of imagination we're dealing with when we learn about the constellations.
And it's all there when you keep looking up.
Welcome back, and now let's take a look at the ice edge. We're still about 75 nautical miles off the coast of Barrow, where we have the open water along the ice edge, and then the ice is starting to grow, and that's all along the northern coast back towards Point Ley. And we weren't able to update the graphic very much today along the northern area, so perhaps it's grown slightly more with the colder temperatures, and that has to do with all of our satellite information that comes in. So we'll keep an eye on those updates as better data comes in. Now, looking at your Friday marine forecast across the southeast, primarily we're going to have a small craft advisory for much of the area on Friday. Winds will be out of the south and southeast around 25 to 30 knots with slightly weaker winds across the southern Lynn Canal around 20 knots. The inner channels will see seas between 4 and 6 feet, and the outer waters will be around 14 to 15 feet. Looking at your Saturday forecast, there will also be gusty conditions along the north towards the Yakutat area, but we'll still primarily keep a southerly flow, and then will be a little bit weaker across the inner channels. No small craft advisory on Saturday for these areas, with seas between 3 and 4 feet, and seas along the eastern areas of the Gulf will all be between 22 and 23 feet on Saturday. Now on Friday, we'll see a small craft again for across much of the northern and western Gulf waters between 25 and 30 knots out of the easterly direction, and then more of a northerly flow across the Cook Inlet down towards Shelikof Strait, 25 to 30 knots primarily. And then seas across Prince William Sound on Friday will be around 5 feet. The Gulf waters will see between 14 and 15 feet. And then we'll see 5 to 6 feet across the inlet, and then towards the Shelikof Strait, the seas will be between 8 and 10 feet. Change of direction in store for your Saturday forecast as that low pressure moves off. We pick up a westerly flow with small crafts again for much of the day on Saturday. Breezy conditions here, 25 to 30 knots with slightly weaker winds across the northern inlet out of the north at 15 knots. And then Prince William Sound seas will be 6 feet. Across the western Gulf, we'll see seas between 12 and 14 feet, a little bit higher seas in the northern Gulf, 17 feet. Across the inlet, 4 feet, and 5 feet across Shelikof Strait and the Barren Islands area. Looking at your Alaska Peninsula, primarily northerly flow and a little bit slightly to the northwest as you get to the south of the Alaska Peninsula. Small craft advisories on this day, 18 feet in the Bristol Bay area for seas, and then 14 feet back towards the Cold Bay area. And then along the Pacific side, we'll see seas between 15 and 22 feet. Looking at your Saturday forecast, change of direction out of the west to northwest flow with small craft advisory mainly except for Bristol Bay, 15 knots here, 4 to 10 feet the seas across the Bering side, and 9 to 11 across the Pacific side. And then looking at your Friday forecast for the Aleutians, primarily small craft advisories again across the area with a northerly flow, 25 to 30 knots. Seas will be between 17 to 18 feet across much of the area. Towards the east, a little bit lower seas between 13 and 14 feet. And as we head into your day on Saturday, we'll pick up that northwesterly flow as that low lifts to the northeast. And then we'll see small crafts across much of the area, 25 to 30 knots, weaker winds out towards Shimia at 15 knots. Seas primarily this day will be between 10 and 15 feet across the Bering Seas, and the Pacific side will be between 8 and 11 feet. Looking at your West Coast forecast, we're expecting a northerly flow tomorrow with very strong gales between 35 and 40 knots, and then seas will be between 10 and 14 feet, a little bit slightly higher towards the central areas between 15 and 16 feet. On your Saturday forecast, not much change in speed, slightly down from Friday, between 35 and 40 knots gales for much of the area. Small craft just to the south of Nunivak Island. Seas on this day will be between 12 and 15 feet primarily, except a little bit closer to the west coast. We'll see 6 feet just to the south of Nunivak Island. Along the northern coastal areas, expect a northerly flow, strongest across the Kotzebue Sound for Friday. And then we'll see seas between 6 and 8 feet all across the northwest coast. Freezing spray all along the area with slightly lower seas between 3 and 4 feet across the northern coast. And then as we head through your day on Saturday, a northeasterly flow across the northern areas with seas between 4 and 5 feet. Across the northwest and back towards Kotzebue Sound, we'll have a northeasterly flow, small crafts here, and then Kotzebue Sound will actually have a gale warning out with freezing spray all along the coast, and then seas will be between 6 to 10 feet along the northwest and 4 to 5 across the Arctic. Looking at your forecast one more time tonight, here's the low pressure system that's finally gaining momentum and heading up towards the northern Gulf is going to bring a lot of rain to the southeast between 2 and 4 inches, slightly higher amounts, melting issues possibly a problem across the mountains. And then we'll have rain moving into all of the coastal areas along the northern Gulf, with rain continuing across the western Gulf. Change over from rain to snow across the central areas of the state, with colder temperatures staying entrenched across the Brooks Range and just south of there. And along the Bering, expect to see a changeover, possibly showery conditions with rain along the Aleutians. Heading into your forecast on Friday, here's the low pressure lifting to the north, pushing the front further inland and starting to break up along the southeast, but still continuing to bring rain, and another surge coming up right behind this low pressure system into the Gulf. And rain and snow across the southern areas of the state, and then the northern areas will continue to see snow with the lightest showery activity across the Bering Strait and light showers across the Bering. On into your Saturday forecast one more time, looking at a rain and snow mix across the Alaska Peninsula. Rain is going to begin to taper off across the eastern areas of the Gulf, with rain continuing along the coastal locations and shower activity continuing on as this low pushes inland. Along the northern tier of the state, very gusty winds are going to stay across the Brooks Range and on over towards the Bering Strait, with gusty winds between 20 and 35 miles per hour. Expect high pressure to move into the western areas of the Bering, bring some weaker and quieter activity there with low clouds. Now, Dave Snider will be back with you tomorrow. Thank you for hanging around, and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.